Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. I'm going to try and do a somewhat quick intro here for you. I just finished reading a two-part series from the guest of my show that I hadn't read yet when we recorded this. I recorded this, a week ago or something. Pardon my voice. I'm sick, and I lost my voice for a couple days, and it's only just coming back. In this two-part series from my guest we're about to hear from, Rob Carpenter, he describes a crash in Alabama I had not yet heard of. And in the two-part piece, he describes why, because it seems like they tried to sweep it under the rug. Multiple failures of the government, multiple failures of multiple agencies. A in-source truck driver from Ethiopia working for a company run by an Ethiopian. The crash in question killed a whole bunch of kids who died trapped in a fire. A very horrifying story. And the Ethiopian trucker brought here specifically to replace people like me and people like Rob. 3 crashes before this one, and nothing was done about it. Apparently there's some scamming going on with the safety equipment on the trucks and some kind of multi-million-dollar deal involving them because the safety equipment failed. Front collision avoidance technology, driver-facing cameras. And Rob and I talk about this, even though we recorded it last week, because it's a fixture of, he's a safety guy now. He used to be a driver. He's now a safety guy and a consultant and a writer. And we both acknowledge that this technology doesn't work. It doesn't prevent anything from happening. It doesn't change the behaviors of bad drivers at all. It's just there to record incidents, and it's there, in my view, to cover up for the fact that the trucking industry, or at least big players within it, and the government don't want to pay competent people. They don't want to train them properly, get everything done as cheap as possible, and they are offloading the costs of this onto society, and that cost is being measured in lives. I'm really upset about this, actually. This is my third go at recording an intro, because the previous one I was swearing too much, and I decided not to release that as an introduction because it would have turned a lot of people off. But I'm going to link to those 2 specific parts about this story in the show notes. I'll link to everywhere you can follow Rob online. His series, 30 Days of Why, is excellent. It's the kind of investigative reporting, again, that the media used to do, but they don't anymore. My long-term listeners will understand that I spent a lot of time covering the Coots case. There's a small handful of people back home in Canada and myself who've looked into that, and the government covering up the fact we have political prisoners, the media going along with it, malfeasance on the part of the cops and the judiciary. And we are seeing that writ large with the trucking industry in America today in 2025. They are trying to pull off a pretty major scam by making Indigenous, native-born homeboys here in Canada and the United States professional drivers unemployable by paying them too little and various other methods, or just insulting us so we don't even come to work. And then using migrants and refugees to replace us. And those people, most of them have no idea what they're doing. They're not being trained properly. They're being exploited by their own. And there's just so much stuff going on with this issue. And, outside of a small handful of people such as myself, Rob, Danielle, American Truckers United, nobody is discussing it. Even the mainstream trucking media seem very, very unwilling to approach this subject. And thank God for people like Rob Carpenter who are brave enough and knowledgeable enough and know exactly what's going on and who are all the guilty parties, and being willing to discuss this for everybody. So when you're done listening to this podcast, go sign up for Rob's Substack, uh, Talking Reckless, and give him a follow, say thanks, send him an email or a message on Twitter or something. He's done some really great work here. Like I say, we recorded this before these two particular parts of his series were released, and we spoke for an hour and a half and never got to this particular story. Maybe I'm gonna have to get him back on. I don't know. I'm really upset about it, and since we've posted about it this morning on Twitter, other people are going to be doing some investigations into exactly what happened here, specifically with people with connections to the United States DOT, because it looks like there was a major cover up. So, anyway, I just wanted to preface the show with that because we didn't get to it during our interview. But anyway, thanks for listening. Book is done. It's in for final editing. I'm in the process of final edits now. Pre-sales will be available in November. Book will be out in March. It looks good. My editor's very happy. My publisher's very happy. Oh, by the way, my publisher, Creed and Culture Books, finally got their website up. I'll drop a link in for that. I've been waiting for them to get that organized here for a while. Pretty slick, pretty professional looking website. You guys should go check it out. They've got a whole slew of books coming out next year, and I'm very honored to be amongst the first small group of books released at the beginning of 2026. I think these guys' project is really cool. Go check that out. So if you're listening to this on some platform that's not Substack, go to mine, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Sign up. You'll never miss a podcast or a bit of my written content. And yeah, go follow Rob. Go check out his stuff. All right, I'm done talking now. Send me an email if you like, gordylocks@protonmail.com. I'm going to get Rob back on to discuss this one. This one story is infuriating. But anyway, Rob does great work, and let's get to him. All right, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're about to hear today is a gentleman, the Substack, which is fan-effing-tastic, and I appreciate how he appears to have preloaded with 30 different articles about the utter disaster that the trucking industry in America is today. And he's dropping them one day at a time. And it's all really good, high quality stuff. Investigative journalism on the level of previous guest of the show, Danielle Schaffen. You guys have all read her stuff and you see her online. Of the T, and what's the sort of weird URL you have to use to get around Twitter or something?
Oh yeah, Talking Reckless.
Talking Reckless, right? Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the show, Mr. Rob Carpenter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm glad you're here. The release of your Substack has been very fortuitous because it sort of dovetails with a bunch of stuff that me, Danielle, the ATU guys, a bunch of other people have been looking into, and your stuff is super detailed and gets way, way, way down into it, and we should talk about all of that.
Yeah,
but first, you've had quite a career in trucking, although I don't think you're behind the wheel anymore.
I still drive sometimes, but it's mostly what I want to drive. So in Virginia, I'm in Virginia. So we do usually one of the things I stuck with is I grew up on a farm, so I like ag. So even if I don't drive full time, I'll still drive ag in the fall because we have corn starts in usually September, and then we jump into soybeans until January. And I skip wheat, during the summer. I don't want to mess with that. Too hot for one thing, and I don't have air conditioning. So I got out of that part of it. The good thing about it is it's kind of like you drive what you want when you want, and it's kind of like the prime stuff. Like you don't have to deal with the riffraff, and that's the good part.
Yeah, agriculture is its own world, and I don't know if it's because agricultural trucking maybe don't pay that good, maybe because it's all kin networks, but it seems to have not been penetrated by the recent arrivals. I did a lot of ag trucking in Western Canada myself. I hauled grain and dry prill fertilizer and anhydrous ammonia, and I also hauled farm equipment on flatbeds from Ontario out to points west. Parts, attachments for tractors, sometimes full pieces of equipment when the old case plant in Hamilton was still open.
Yeah.
So I've touched on the ag trucking world quite a bit, and I do enjoy it. It's one of my favorites because, you know, guys at the fertilizer distributors and the tractor, repair places and dealerships are always happy to see you. There's no grumpy warehouse workers or factory guys. There's usually never any waiting. They get right to you, and you get to it. Eh?
It's just a different world. I mean, and so I mean, I guess coming from a farm, I kind of went into what I knew. I went into ag, and then I did some timber stuff here in Virginia, and which was good because we've got a Smurfit Stone. Well, it's not Smurfit Stone now. I think it's Rock 10 now, or whatever they've named it at this point. But so it's kind of everything you could possibly want here in Virginia. So anyway, that's where I stuck when I drive. And then sometimes I'll do drive away. If they've got like something I'm interested in, like a show truck, a really nice show truck, I just want to drive. They'll call and they'll give it to me. But other than that, I don't do as much driving as I used to do.
Right, and judging by all your social media bios, it looks like you do some management and safety stuff as well.
Yeah, so we do. So I got in a truck accident. I want to say this was 2017, and I think before that, it was like we would run however we had to run because money was the objective, and we didn't care about the rules. So that's kind of how it happened. So and then after that, I got a little bit more serious than I had historically been for the past 20 years in compliance and risk. So I got into sold my company because of the crash, got hired to run a company, ran some other companies, got into big company like enterprise level management and oversight, and then went full on into compliance when I left that. So now all we do is expert witness work, but we don't take any expert witness cases that are against carriers or drivers. So it's only expert witness work where the defendant, I mean the plaintiff, is the trucking side. Anyway, that's majority of what we do. We do some work for Amazon and FedEx and some large companies at TruckSafe, and that's generally it.
Interesting. All right, so tell me who TruckSafe is before I get into the deep questions here about your relationships with two of the usual suspects when things go kittywampus.
Yeah, yeah. So TruckSafe, it was started by Brandon Wiseman and Jared Childress, both lawyers from Scopolitas. Brandon's dad is still at Scopolitas, Tim Wiseman. Um, and that's generally kind of the flow of like, hey, how do three guys or four guys at TruckSafe and Childress Law, how does that all work and who are you all? But that's where we get our customer base. If they don't like Scopolitas or they're fed up there, they usually come to TruckSafe. So that's kind of how some of that works.
And what exactly is TruckSafe? What does TruckSafe do?
So TruckSafe does just exclusively compliance, expert witness work, and then on the Childress Law side, which is Jared and Brandon, they do just transportation law. So contracts, helping truckers understand contracts, what they should and should not sign, how to hire the right people, who not to hire, all the good legalities of trucking. They needed somebody who practically knew trucking. So they came to me and were like, hey, you work for private equity, you've owned fleets, you've driven trucks, you still drive trucks. We need somebody with practical experience. Come on over. And that's how it all started.
Oh man, I was going to talk to you mostly about your Substacks, but now it seems I'm more interested in what's going on with these two entities. Um, Amazon and FedEx and safety. So there's a trend in American trucking now of using power only carriers to relocate trailers for all these huge companies, right? So Amazon, very famously, if you don't know, to my listeners, I think most of them do, does not really have much in the way of their own trucks. Everything is contracted out. FedEx has been doing that a lot. Now all your big carriers, JB Hunt, Werner, Knight Swift, go on their websites and they immediately advertise, "Hey, come pull our trailers. We have these huge trailer pools. Sign up to be a contractor for us." And that's where things start getting interesting with the safety stuff because specifically with Amazon, uh, good Lord, just terrible, terrible safety records. I quote these two pieces from the mainstream media often. CBS and the Wall Street Journal did some deep dives into the contractors that work for Amazon. And between those deep dives and recent incidents that have taken place since they were published, we're talking like 150 people have been killed on the roads in collisions involving Amazon contractors. So, from where you're standing with Truck Safe and the work you guys do, WTF?
Well, I have to say this at first. There's only so much I can say because they are clients, and there you'll notice that in one of the Substack articles, I think it was the Austin crash that did involve Amazon because it was an Amazon trailer. I completely left that word out of the entire article. I never even mentioned it, and that's
Right,
because I couldn't.
right.
But so I'll say this about it: it is actually very efficiently run. I'll say that.
Efficiency does not equal safety, though.
It doesn't. Not always. And I'm not going to say that they're not. I'm not going to say my position on their
Right. All right. Fair
they're
enough.
they're a huge client, but I'll say this: they are very proactive in their methods on how they manage risk and how they manage litigation and how they manage safety. And I think one of the things with them is they are focusing on how to pick the right people and eliminate the wrong people.
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall at the meetings they have at Amazon Relay about how to accomplish that. And I'm sure I would have some suggestions for them that would see me canceled in many other forums.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned this other sort of legal team you work with, and they brought you on because of your practical knowledge and experiences. One of the circles I'm trying to square in the business and the industry sort of writ large is how do we bridge the gap between what guys actually know, embodied sort of skill and knowledge and common sense and years of experience versus actuarial nerds who go to meetings and only look at spreadsheets and don't see the things we see, right? So, for instance, I spoke with another gentleman for the book I'm writing, and I can't name him because he wanted it off the record, but like basically he knows that like driver facing cameras don't do anything, but he has to keep lawyers and juries happy. God forbid he actually get into an incident. And I'm wondering about the penetration of our on the road experiential understanding into the equation of like broader safety questions. Like, is it getting into their heads at all, or is it just spreadsheet litigation world? Like, what's going on?
I think it gets through to some extent, but like you said, a lot of these people have a mindset of actuarial, like what is the risk here, and like what does the data say versus what's practical, and that's why they recognize that they've needed somebody with practical experience, which is why they brought me on. But I think there's some, um, I think bridging it is probably a good word, is the one you used on both sides, because I do think, and I will say this: I did not want dash cams in my trucks when I drove. And when I owned my trucks, my drivers didn't want them in there. Most of my drivers were old school drivers that had hung on with me from companies that I had managed before I started my company. So I will say with dash cams, one of the things that I like is I did not feel that I always needed dash cams when I was in business. I was not concerned about Ty Sawyer or a lot of the other drivers that I had working for me because they had been driving since the 50s and 60s. I mean, these people were true professional drivers, right? Now I look at our driver base, like the driver persona has completely changed. And I think that part of my agreement with the actuarial side and seeing these crashes and working these expert witness cases that I do is you're not dealing with the same driver persona anymore. And I think that to some extent these dash cams are giving you visibility that you have to babysit some of these people. But I think a lot of that goes back to say 20 years ago when I put out the data like for stick shifts, manual transmission, 18 speed, 13
Oh,
speed, whatever.
we were going to get to that, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, but it's like those people who can't drive that, who just can't grasp it and say, "Hey, I think I have the manual dexterity and the mental capacity to shift gears." They would typically say, "Well, I'm just not going to go into that industry. I'm not going to take on that challenge. It's not worth it." Now you don't have that. So you've got a bunch of riffraff coming in, and that is one thing that I do like about cameras is it gives you the ability to see what that level of driver is doing. And I think really to me, that's the only way that you're even going to get through to that level of driver. And we are getting more and more of those drivers on the highway.
Right. So I guess all right. Okay. So the question I have, and I haven't actually really asked anybody this yet. So maybe you're the good first guy to ask this question. Is exceptions, right? So let's say you're running a fleet, you've got 40 trucks. Due to the nature of the business in 2025, 30 of those trucks have automatic transmissions and you have riffraff drivers. But, maybe 5 or 10 of your guys have got 10, 20 years of experience and they grew up driving manuals and they're actual legitimate old school truckers.
Yeah.
Driver facing cameras for the riffraff, not driving facing cameras for the old guys. How's that sound?
It sounds good, but it sounds good from a raw perspective. But the problem with it is you run into the quality of it, and then you run into EEOC
But
complaints that well, he's
but
put it in my truck, but he didn't put it in his truck because he's old and I'm young, and he thinks I'm dumb, but he thinks the old guys are smart. So then you run into that equality issue and EEOC complaints and labor and
what's EEOC?
it's basically if you have a complaint to say, well, he doesn't like me because I'm black, or he doesn't like me because I'm young, or he doesn't like me because I'm old, you can go to the Department of Labor and you can file this complaint, and then I have to answer for it and possibly pay you uh, fines and civil penalties because I discriminated against you based on your age, sex, ability, etc. So
I know the manual transmission thing ties into another problem we have in the broader culture. It's like de-skilling, right? So like
yeah,
we have become so accustomed to technology doing so many things for us, and if not technology, in-source labor from other countries, because now actually doing things and working with your hands is viewed as like day class A, and we don't pay. So now we have all Mexicans and Guatemalans hanging our drywall for us, and whatever low IQ fucking simian we can find, we're putting behind the wheel of trucks, all because nobody wants to pay for skill, competency, craft, and recognize it as such, right? And this is across numerous industries. And it's interesting how that uh, sort of overlaps with what you just said about, well, you're discriminating against me because of X. No, you're being discriminated against because you have no skills.
yeah,
And the reason you have no skills is not necessarily your fault, right? It's this culture we live under and this sort of like desire for, ever more returns for corporations, which means paying people the cheapest and de-skilling, de-skilling, de-skilling. So like I I'm not sure what the answer is for an industry like trucking, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, writing a book, talking to a million people, started this podcast, is I'm trying to like work through this. Like, what's the solution here?
well,
But
I mean, I think you hit it on the head. The answer is you've removed the barriers. You have to re-implicate you have to reinstitute the barriers into the industry, right? Like we're talking about manual transmissions, but it's the exact same of thing as saying we're going to take school teachers and allow pedophiles to become school teachers of elementary age kids, right? Like that's the barrier to that industry for a reason. Truck driving is a dangerous job, and you're operating on the highway where you need not only skill, but you also need to understand the moral, ethical concepts of what your responsibilities are with those with sharing the road with other people, right? So if you're going down the road, and I've got countless videos of it where you're dancing in the seat or you've got your feet out the window, like half hanging out because you've got an automatic, you don't need to shift, right? Like who needs feet in the truck? But you know, it's that kind of behavior with people that are out on the highway that is a problem. And it really boils down to two things: who you're hiring, the trucks you're buying, and what and who you're putting on the highway, and what and who we are giving authorities to operate, and what and who we are giving CDLs to. So I think that's our biggest issue. It's a licensing standard problem. But the other part of that is like
100%. I agree with that 100%.
yeah, and it's who we're giving authority to because ultimately, and I think that's one of my big gripe points with all these cases that you look at, whether it's imminent hazard or NTSB or NHTSA or whoever, you look at all these crashes, and I bet you 50% of them don't have any accountability assigned to ownership of the company, right? It's all against the driver. We got drivers in Arizona doing 22 years for the TikTok crash. We got the driver in Virginia doing 3 years for killing Ashley Chapman on her way to getting a wedding dress fitted. It's like all of those people that own those companies that hired those drivers and then encourage that behavior, they're not facing anything at all. And those are the issues that I have a problem with. A lot of people are like, "Well, Rob is somewhat anti-truck." It's not that I'm anti-truck. I'm anti-bad trucker and I'm anti-bad truck owner. And if the owners stop hiring bad people and we stop letting bad owners get authority to operate, then you're not going to have a lot of these issues. You'll have better people put on the road, better equipment on the road, and you'll have more skilled people. Because even though we as a society and we as an industry have removed the barriers, as an owner, you can by policy institute your own barriers and say, I'm not going to hire anybody under 25. I'm not going to hire anybody who can't drive a manual transmission. You can implement all those yourself just because there's no law or they're not
Well,
manufacturing them.
now I just as a counterpoint to that, not to say that I disagree with that as a method. The problem is you are operating in a market where all the rates are set by the lowest common denominator, right? Like there's a concept in economics called wage floor, right?
Yeah.
All other wages above it are set by it. And so what's happened, and you and I both know this, some of my listeners do, is the, as you put it, the trucking company owners, since the deregulatory framework that came into trucking after the MCA Motor Carrier Act of 1980, anyone with a pulse and $300 can sign up for a motor carrier number, right? Now, that's done some really good things. It allowed a bunch of operators in the industry in the 1970s who couldn't get their authority, who were running on trip leases, who were like working directly for certain companies under their authorities. They could open up their businesses and do well. I was trained and brought into the trucking industry by one of those companies that did well after deregulation. The problem is it's also opened the door to all these bottom feeders. And then we take that and then we find out that now foreign entities are looking at all the loopholes in the United States trucking system. Hey, I can sign up for a motor carrier number even though my office is in Serbia or in India. And I've got all this communication technology and I can text my drivers on Telegram and tell them what to do in their own language. They don't need to worry about learning English. Oh, there's these other guys over here who will allow me to backdoor into the electronic logging device and I can make this guy work 20 hours a day and he'll be happy to do it because if he don't, I'll kick him out and then he has to move back to Serbia or India or wherever. So we have this like massive labor exploitation going on top of exploitation of the holes in the system. And now our highways are death traps.
Pretty much. No, that's what's happening. I mean, we've got some companies where we've turned them down, and Danielle and I were talking back and forth yesterday. And there's some companies that we work with, like there's like Russians or Uzbekistan, Uzbeks is what I call them. But you can look at their companies and like you'll go to their office for an audit to represent them in an audit with the FMCSA, and there's nothing in the office when you get there. There's nothing but carpet and sheetrock. So it's like, is this your real office or not? Well, no, we're really in Florida. I'm like, well, you have this with, they're coming here in Illinois. Like, but there's nothing in this room. He's like, yeah, we've never been there, but we're going to have we're going to have furniture delivered today and copiers delivered today. And we're going to have two employees up there when the FMCSA comes. And it's like, then you start to dig into these companies because we don't represent the trash. Once we realize that you're trash, like we're done. If you're not interested in doing the right thing, we're not going to help you do the wrong thing. So once we realized what was happening, that was it. And then they had to face the consequences of that audit. But um, we see it all the time. It's not uncommon, especially up in Elk Grove and areas like that, where a lot of these companies are just empty offices. Like if you might look like a building, you see people like her and Search Carriers and Jamie Anderson putting pictures of businesses. It's like, hey, this is a building. Well, there's nothing in the building. So even though it's a legitimate commercial business or office, there might not be anybody in there. Might not be anything in there. So it's
Uh,
just a it's
yeah,
it's
and
a
that
jacked up thing.
yeah, and that's one of the holes, the loopholes in the system is that nobody's doing any enforcement of existing laws, right? Like there, even outside of trucking, even out in like, all other wider issues in society, there's all kinds of bad stuff that happens because existing laws are not being enforced correctly, right? We can actually fix, there's all kinds of laws already on the books meant to fix stuff, but they're not being enforced. And the FMCSA, I don't know what's going on over there. I know that like their budget's nearly $1 billion a year. I've heard from many people that a lot of the staff there are former American Trucking Association guys, but like this is their responsibility. Why are they not going out there and chasing down all these scummy carriers who are breaking the most basic law of like, you are registered here, all of your documents and operations are here, and we can come and audit you here, but you're
Yep.
not. It's like
Yep.
the first rule of signing up a company, you know?
Well, it's FMCSA is kind of a weird bag. So we've got some former administrators that work with us at TruckSafe, like Annette Sandberg and Jack Van Steenberg and Jim Mullins. And what you know, we have, I guess, more visibility into it. And then I got Duffy up with Dooner on What the Truck for his interview. So it's like we know kind of a different view of it. So we understand that yes, they have a, I would say, decent budget. But if you look at, let's say, FAA versus FMCSA, FAA has 10,000 employees to manage air. FMCSA has less than 1,000 now, and more, even more took buyouts. Right. So this was before Trump took office. We had 1,000 people running the whole FMCSA for what, 700,000 carriers. Right. Some of the top people running the agency that were actually running it, even though we have no leadership there and haven't really since 2019, a lot of them took buyouts. So now maybe we're down to 800, and you don't even have a new administrator yet. He is supposed to start on the 22nd, whether he's confirmed or not. But that doesn't change the fact that for the past 5 or 6 years, what have we had? 10 different administrators. And one of those was caught red handed on the speed limiter mandate, making backdoor deals, which is why she quit. So,
Who was that Hutchison?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
did not know about the backdoor deals. Like I didn't like her for a host of other reasons, but what was going on there?
So there was, I'll have to go back. I may just do a write up on it, but so she had made some kind of arrangement behind that was just not above board, right? And it had something to do with the speed limiter deal to continue to push the speed limiter deal. It was widely publicized when it happened, and maybe a week or two later, she was done. Um, so that was that, and then that was over the whole speed limiter mandate
Right.
proposal.
Right. And okay, so speaking of the speed limiter mandate, whenever the government like brings in a mandate to control people like you and me to solve a problem that's caused by people not you and me,
Yeah,
right? Um, you would think that they would like look at the data. Everyone says, "Oh, we're data driven. We're all science based, and look at the statistics and check our spreadsheets." Okay, let's do that. ELD mandate comes into effect late 2017. A couple of years into it, Overdrive, in conjunction with another organization, do a total breakdown of what happened before the ELD mandate with truck safety and what happened after. And it was pretty conclusive. Aggressive driving citations, speeding, tailgating, all that stuff went up. Collisions, depending on the size of the company you worked for, went up. HOS violations went up. All of the things that the ELD mandate was promised to address, it did the opposite. And I'll never forget this. Robin Hutchison was on, I think, like a Landline magazine or Landline media podcast. And she was presented this question like, is the FMCSA going to revisit the ELD mandate now that it's been conclusively shown to have done the opposite of what it said it was going to do? And she said no.
Like, yeah. I mean, I was on a podcast yesterday and we were talking about the same thing. It's like, what rules have been a total waste? What regs have been a total waste? And what regs have been worth their salt? And then we even talked about some regs that aren't regs at all and are really low hanging fruit that make a lot of common sense, that are not regs and are not under proposal. But I think when you're talking about let's look at the data and review what makes sense, what works, what doesn't, it's selective review of data. It is totally agenda driven. And if you look at even how the administrator is chosen, the ATA is the board that chose that administrator, right? I'm not saying anything bad about Bars. I like the guy. I'm not saying whether I would have chosen him or not. But at the end of the day, he was ultimately chosen by a board that included Chris Spear and people from the ATA and CVSA who recommended him to the Trump administration. So as much as people say like Trump is pro-trucker, I'm not anti-Trump. I'll say that I voted for him twice. But I'll say this, the agenda-driven policy arm of the government in the White House is the ATA. Whether you believe it or know it or not, that's who chose this administrator, and that's who kind of dictates what they perceive to be our communal problems when they only represent 7% of the industry. And they're all mega carriers. And I think you'll agree, and any other carrier or person who's owned trucks or driven trucks would agree that our problems as the mom and pops and the farmers our issues are drastically different and our agenda is drastically different. We're more about survival. They can burn piles of cash. So there's all kinds of different things that we can look at in that, but it's very selective data when we're talking about reviewing data to make regulation changes. And it's right. Like, we had a conversation yesterday about this agenda driven topics, factors. It's like somebody was complaining, well, I can't get my money for 3 months so I have to get a factor. Like, well, that's never going to change because the factoring lobby is $180 billion. You think anybody that pushes that agenda is going to decide to eliminate factors? What was the purpose of factors? The only purpose a factor serves is to come in and charge you to get the money you worked for, right? So it's those things like there's a lobby behind it.
It's amazing that the factoring thing is just rank parasitism, right?
Yeah,
I'm getting in between you and your money because, well, maybe it takes them a little while to pay you, but we will pay you faster. One of my mentors in the trucking industry is this guy named Trent Lalonde out in Saskatchewan. Great guy. I ran the ice with him. He's been an owner operator his entire life. Now he works for. He always tells me never to tell people who he works for, so I won't. Anyhow, he's moved on to other things besides trucking. However, he always told me that like if I ever bought my own truck, he's like never get into the factoring cycle. Like we're already on very small margins, and if you're giving 3% of your money away to these clowns, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. They get you into this cycle where, some are better than others where they're not as vicious. And I think that if you get the right one, you might be able to be okay to preserve cash flow. But that's like you have to, like, if you can avoid it, just avoid it. But it's never going to change. But I guess my argument with the whole factor piece is why do they even exist? Because someone came in and said that it would be good. And then shippers said, oh, well, we don't have to pay it cash on delivery anymore, right? Like, would you just let them factor it? So now we got a $180 billion industry that's driven by agenda that has no other purpose to be here. Like, why can't you as the shipper just pay me what you owe me, or the broker pay me what you owe me when I deliver it for not a fee, right? Brokers, even when I was a broker, it was We would pay on delivery, but we would charge you 2.5%. So
Yeah. Well, so let's zoom out on the factoring thing here a little bit. So another big picture, big society problem is the financialization of everything, right? Everyone wants to make money with money instead of actually doing things.
yeah,
So I think the factoring kind of plays a part in that because it's like if I'm the shipper of company A, maybe they're a big corporation, maybe they're small, and their cash flow, they have their own cash flow problems, but they also have a lot of their own money tied up in like short term investments. So they like lend money to other people for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, year, whatever. And then if they can keep that money sitting there at whatever interest rate they're making, and then take 3 months to pay you, they're making more money just on money, like moving money around. And the trucker is now getting screwed for it. Because again, nobody cares about paying people in the material economy anymore because it's more profitable to make money up with money,
yeah, yeah.
which is just bizarre, right? Like Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple, and I think we have to like think deeply about why, because at the end of the day, we all have to eat. Material reality is more. I mean, as much as like our modern economy is also important, and representation of value through cash is important. Um, the worship of it as such and using it to create itself without some representation in reality seems like a real bad road to go down.
Well, this really was opened up to me because I'm a farm kid, right? Like we didn't have a whole lot. My grandfather drank out of the same Looney Tune cup, and he worried whether it was gonna. He was always emotional in terms of not emotional to other people. He seldom talked to anybody, but he was always emotional on what was going to affect his money, right? That's typical farm, typical truck mentality, especially old school. But when I got into private equity, that is a world that I was wholly unfamiliar with. When I started working with private equity boards and I realized how that there was this other world of free flowing cash that was available to people who already had as much cash as they could possibly imagine. It was a weird thing, but then I started thinking about it in terms of trucking. So in our case, if we were going to buy a trucking company, we were going to re-outfit this trucking company with 200 new Volvos. These billionaires who had just sold Yeti for $2 billion after buying it for 60 million, they had money. They just didn't use their money. They would go to somebody like Volvo Finance and they would get money from them and it wouldn't cost them anything and it would be there that afternoon, right? So it's some of it I started looking at not just the different world of finance for the big people, but how that affects the difference between the 7% that really are the focus of the ATA versus the 93% that aren't. Because a lot of those money circles run in the 7% of the ATA side, right? So if you look at who goes to MCE, ATA, you look at the list, it's all the big people, it's all the big money people, it's all the big carriers, the big OEMs, etc. Not a lot of small people there. So that money world is tied up, I think, a lot of times in that 7%. But I think a lot of times it still goes down to the barriers and why we remove the barriers. They can't make their money if they don't have the lowest paying people to pay in their industry. So it's all tied together.
Right. No, that's a very good point, and that's something I've been banging on about with ATA members for years now, and that's sort of what led me to, you know, Shannon and the guys at ATU and trying to figure out this non-domiciled thing, and you know there's a continuity here. So post deregulation, lots of competition. You know, maybe in the mid 1980s they had an argument about there being a shortage of drivers as guys said F this and quit. And then after NAFTA was signed because of all the additional cross-border freight. I will give them that there may have been 2 periods of actual driver shortage, but
Yeah.
those periods are both 30 years behind us now.
Yeah.
So ever since, again, they've been doing this whole race to the bottom thing where they're such huge operations and they only make money on the margins that they have to have every cost input be tightly controlled, including labor. And so they don't want to pay market rate for labor, right? Like the thing that drives me nuts is all these people saying that there's a free market. I'm like, there's no free market in trucking if the government is consistently flooding the zone with new entrants to it through subsidy, right? So ATA, their members often run their own trucking schools. Those trucking schools produce the new drivers for them because they have such bad retention rates. And then those truck driving schools are subsidized by various levels of government, right? And after decades of that, it seems like most Americans have got wise to the scam, right? Like you can go on YouTube and see bonehead truckers. There's a zillion guys with channels. You can read my stuff and you can consider that before you sign up to become a truck driver. And, I think people have realized that like there's big scams going on. You're never going to make it working for a mega carrier. They're just going to chew you up and spit you out. You're going to like lose a year of your life to working to scumbags who are going to underpay you. You're never going to get home and the whole thing's going to be terrible, right? So now, who do we convince to drive these trucks because we don't have our autonomous trucks yet? Well, those guys from Somalia that just showed up as refugees in Minneapolis, all those like 20 million, 30 million people that crossed the border that was not controlled over successive administrations. We got all this like, labor lying around, but I guess they don't qualify for a CDL because they don't live here and they don't speak English. Well, if we just change the rules to give them a license, even though they don't live here and even though they don't speak English, then wow, whole new labor market opens up and we can keep paying people shit.
Pretty much. But I think a lot of that's you boil it all down and it's a licensing standard issue. And you're allowing every state to make its own rules, right? And that's where you have California and AB 60 and Washington and then Minnesota. And these states are making their own rules in terms of who's going to get a CDL and who's not. But that's the biggest issue. And I don't know what the answer to that is. If there's like a single like federal CDL, I guess you would call it, like where we're licensing through one agency versus 50 agencies, and maybe that can make it better. But I don't know. I don't know if that's possible or not. But I think if you start looking at where the cash comes from, it's still the states that have these programs that are fronting money for these schools. So it's like the ones in Minnesota that I listed in my article, like Class and all these other ones. It's these workforce grants that are paying people that shouldn't get CDLs, and they're not screening them on whether they should be able to get a CDL. It's like, sure, we'll take your money. And I'm on the board of one organization that does it for criminals. So I'm not solely against everybody having a CDL. I think I've hired criminals that were felons many times over who worked for me and did an excellent job because they had turned their life around and they were basically just, I'm indebted to you. And anything that I needed, they did it and they did it right. But it's not everybody. So I think there's still that barrier to entry licensing piece and then the accountability side of the carriers that are getting the authorities. We're trusting a lot of people to hire the right people, and they're not hiring the right people. They're purposely hiring the wrong ones.
Right. So let me tie this back into the power only thing, right? So now Knight Swift, Werner, JB Hunt, FedEx, Amazon, they have essentially washed their hands of the accountability and screening and barrier to entry component to all of this, right? We are going to have these guys over here move our trailers for us, and it's on them to do all this, all these little small contractors. A lot of these little small contractors are also run by people that showed up here essentially yesterday and got their licenses through scams run by the state of Minnesota and California. And now we're seeing this thing in Nebraska that lit everybody's hair on fire last week.
Yeah.
Kenya. Kenya. And it goes deep. It's like, why are none of these companies and organizations trying to hire, American drivers? And I put up a tweet here a little while back, which was immediately criticized by a dickwad named Ken Adamo at DAT, because I asked the question, why is it only in one direction, right? Are there American truck drivers, Canadian truck drivers in checked shirts like this, drinking Tim Hortons coffee, flipping trucks over all over the Punjab? No. Are they doing this in Somalia or Eritrea or Guatemala or Honduras? No, it's only ever in one direction. Why is that? Where is the American truck driver supposed to go once he's been completely replaced by in-sourced labor because nobody here wants to pay anymore, right? And the biggest companies, these guys that like donate hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to the ATA, who in turn give that to our politicians to allow this shit to go on, they just like, oh, hey, it's not our problem, man. We hired these independent contractors. Freedom, free market. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yep. But I think one of the things, and this kind of goes to what I call financing of risk and like how you go about managing your risk. And a lot of carriers will look at this like, let's use truck parking, for instance. A lot of carriers will look at this and say, we should not have to pay for parking. And I agree with that. But one of the things, people have asked me, like, why do you support truck parking club? I'm like, I didn't say I supported truck parking club. What I said is truck parking club, one, drew attention to the parking issue, but two, they give you an option if you decide to pay. That's all I've said. So that's kind of how I look at it. But part of it goes to financing risk. And one of the things that I did watch in the money world of private equity and policy and watching how these large carriers that are our clients work is they look at how can we hedge our operation against risk. So you might go to one giant retailer facility and find that they only have 3 trucks, and the other 800 that are there belong to people that they contract with. So what they're doing essentially across the board is they're finding ways, just like you are with truck parking. I might tell you with truck parking, I want you to park with truck parking club because I would rather pay $25, make sure you're secured behind a locked signed gate to where you don't have enforcement, you don't have vandalism, you don't have cargo theft because it's a high value load. For me, that's how I decide to finance my risk. That's how I hedge myself out. These larger companies are looking at it like risk models. So some companies we consult with are focused exclusively on DOT compliance. How do I hire the right driver? How do I put the right truck on the road? How do I upkeep my maintenance? Others, your largest companies, not as concerned with that. Their biggest thing that they do once a year through third parties usually is look at our risk profile. And how they've learned to absolve themselves from risk is to operate under their own DOT and then farm everything out to someone else. And that's really how it's boiled down is like we're hedging ourselves against risk. If you haul it, it's your problem. Now, that's not always the case. Some people haven't figured it out yet. I've got a fuel hauler out in the West, one of the biggest fuel haulers in the United States, 1,400 fuel haulers. 700 of their trucks are owner operators, but they don't have their own authority. They don't have their own tags. They're 100% leased on to this company. And everything they do bleeds back to this major carrier. That's because they just haven't figured out the risk profile yet and how to absolve themselves of that. One, the FMCSA exposure, but then two, the financial exposure and liability that comes from the highway accident litigation if that owner operator gets into a crash. So that's really the dynamic that you're looking at. You've got people that are just companies that are trying to hedge risk.
Right. Yeah. No. It's just incredible the whole hedging against risk and the involvement of insurance and then attorneys and like everyone's afraid of going to court and getting that nuclear verdict assessed against them, right? And again, I'm trying to bridge this thing. What are the factors if you are a carrier that is going to reduce your likelihood of risk regards the guys you put behind the wheel? And there's this tension going on here, right? Yes, we all want to reduce risk, but we also don't want to pay, right? And the truism, you get what you pay for, is it's a truism, right? So like a guy who's like, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I keep using myself as an example, right? I have had a CDL for 28 years. I grew up and I worked for a company when I was in high school. I trained with them at night after school, got my license when I was 18, did 2 years running around local, 1 year regionally, went traveling, drove logging trucks in New Zealand. And like there was gradients to what I did, right? I was trained properly.
Yep.
I have never been involved in a collision. I have experience driving the biggest, longest, heaviest shit in Australia. I ran the ice. I've hauled fucking super dangerous chemicals, oversized loads, resume as long as your arm. Yet, many employers only want to pay me what they're paying their lowest common denominator guys. And I've gotten this argument with a bunch of these fucking yahoos around where I live here in upstate New York who are cheap cocksuckers. And I keep telling them, do you want your truck to be maintained and kept in good shape and not get in an accident? I'm your guy. You want to hire? I literally had a logging guy here try to offer me $14 an hour to drive a logging truck. And when I said no, he got all pissy with me. And he just told me when we were doing like my drive around with him to show him what I could do, he complained about the previous two drivers, one of whom eventually failed a drug test because he was a meth head, and then the other guy that kept running into shit. And I'm like, hello, $14 an hour, that's what it bought you, right? It bought you the lowest common denominator. I am not that. If you want a safe, competent operator that's going to make your truck, keep your truck maintained, not get in accidents, get things delivered, show up every day, you're going to have to pay for it. And they don't want to pay. Everybody is a capitalist until the price of labor gets bid up.
Yeah, it kind of boils down to why I buy the cow when you can get the milk for free, right? Like, why do I need Gord or whoever that's experienced and wants more money when I can hire the criminals from that are coming out of prison that will work for hardly nothing, right? With like the agent, like the group that I'm on the board for. They truly take advantage of those people, and they openly are willing to accept it because they're trying to get out of prison and they're trying to find, a way into the industry.
Right, but where this meets the risk mitigation though, right? Like we're talking about two things. Everyone says we want to mitigate our risk.
Yeah.
Right? You are introducing a massive amount of risk with like not necessarily low quality drivers, but low trained, low skilled, just started. Like the University of Virginia or Virginia Tech, I should say, did a study on this years ago where they like tried to figure out, is it age or is it experience that is involved with truck involved collisions?
Both.
Right? It's a little bit of both, but like they found that like if you have less than 5 years of experience, like you're 50% more likely to get in an incident than somebody with more.
Yeah.
Like the numbers are in, but they still don't want to pay more for the better drivers to mitigate their risk.
Well, they don't have to. So they're looking at it like we can get the bottom of the barrel. We don't have barriers anymore. We can get the bottom of the barrel and then we can just train them to be gored. That's what they think. But in that course of training time, you still expose everybody else to more risk on the highway. So I think in some cases they look at it like it's the cost of doing business. What's the actual likelihood of them having a crash? And I think a lot of times people look at that um, in that perspective, like the risk is negligible, right?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, what risk is negligible?
The risk is negligible of some of these people having a catastrophic highway crash. So they're looking at it in that light. Like if I only have them for, say they're only here for 6 months, what's the odds of them having a crash in 6 months? It still fills my seat. I'll tell you one that's really good for this is trash haulers. Trash haulers cannot get good drivers or any experienced drivers to save their life. So you know what they hire? Absolute trash. I mean, that's all that's in the trash business, right? But they still have to keep their wheels turning, and they realize that there's risk and exposure into the people that they're hiring at that bottom of the barrel level. But they still have to put them on the road, so they still weed out as much. They kind of weigh their trash drivers. It's like, well, I can kind of get by with this guy. He's only got 3 felonies, right? Like I can get by with this one. He's only had 2 crashes. The
So
other,
can I just want a little definition. When you say trash haulers, do you mean like the municipal guys picking it up,
yeah,
or the
yeah,
guys going from like municipal collection site to landfill with
yes,
48
yes.
footers?
So when you have these municipal sites that have to get the trash, I mean, a lot of people don't get it. So yeah, municipal collection sites, then somebody has to bring these open top trailers. They take it to the dump. They drop it. Most of the time it's drop and hook. They've got maybe 600 trailers and 100 trucks. So those type of operations, no one wants to do that. No one wants to climb up on the top of that trailer and throw tarps. No one wants to walk in trash. No one wants to stink every day. No one wants that job. And when you get into those jobs, it's especially bad because no one wants to do the hard work. No one wants to get dirty. It's like household goods. Even though people are going into homes, we've got pedophiles that are working for household goods carriers. Why? Because they can't
Jeebus
get anybody else
Christmas.
to move furniture. They can't get anybody else to move trash.
Are they not? Is it a money thing? Are they not paying enough? Like what are the rates that trash haulers get? That's a totally like okay. So I live in upstate New York, right? So New York City and the like wider area around it, New Jersey, downstate, Long
Yep.
Island, millions and millions of people generating millions of tons of trash every single week, and there's a bunch of dumps north of me on the north end of the Finger Lakes, right? Like Geneva, Waterloo, that whole stretch along Interstate 90. Then there's a couple down around Elmira and Corning, because downstate just continues producing junk.
Yep.
So there's like a cottage industry here of trash haulers, and there's a couple of them sort of closer to downstate. They've got these special four-axle trailers because New York State has like a higher weight limit permit you can get. And then, there's the big corporate trash haulers like MBI, Mount Mr. Bolts
Mr.
or
Gold.
whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, like what are those guys being paid? Like I have no idea because like nobody talks in the CB anymore. I always used to try and talk to them and they'd be on their own channel or they just ignored me. But like, how's
Yeah,
that work?
most of them don't use CVs. But anyway, they're so most of them, like Mr. Bolt's, Lucky Dog was around for a while until they had the crash that killed the girl. And they were a client of ours, but they basically pay by the load. So the more you run, the more money you make. But some of these guys are pumping out $2,000 a week. But those are the killers. I mean, they'll get in a truck, they'll fudge the log books because they're also running short haul, right? So they're truly not regulated by ELD hours of service. And that's another whole another topic on like why ELDs didn't work because you only got 50% of the country on ELD. But then you have people like these trash haulers who are running short haul, maybe York, Pennsylvania, all the way down to Norfolk, Virginia. That's a huge 150 air mile circle, right? But they can do it legally. It's right on the cusp of it. So you got these people running around that are being rushed to produce more work in hazardous environments with trash equipment. I did some inspections last year for one of the people you just mentioned. I crawled under the back of this trailer. There was no springs in the back of this trailer. On the whole axle, there was no spring left, just U-bolt. That's it. Spring was completely gone. I'm like, how long does a spring, how did it crack? Two, how did no one notice it? And then how long for all the pieces of it to fall out of the back of the trailer? And where did they go? So they're running bad drivers, they're running bad equipment, they're running them to death, incentivizing based on pay by the load. And yes, the money's good, but you look at some of the dash cams from these guys, they are coated in dirt, they stink, their trucks are trash, they're just in a bad environment. So that money they work for is truly earned money. It's just not, it's probably one of the unsafest trucking industries that exists.
Yeah, I remember I got into a bit of a Twitter fight with this guy that lives here in upstate New York. He's a steel hauler, but he's just a troll. Good guy, but he's still a troll because I observed a bunch of these trash guys on New York Route 17 with the overweight permits, and you can put 102,000 pounds on a five axle that typically only carries 80 in New York as long as it's registered and you pay for the permit, right?
Makes
And
paper.
yeah, safer apparently. I mean, it makes sense getting more product moved for less money. It makes economic sense, but like you know, this was the argument I got in with the guy. I'm like, man, the R permit system is stupid. If you're going to be 100 grand, you should at least have three axles. That's kind of standard for the rest of the world. New York, you wonder why the roads are beat up. But then these trash haulers are just doing 70, 80 miles an hour. You're with 100 grand on a five axle. Like, what are you guys doing? And I said something about this on Twitter, and this dude who hauls steel is like, well, I've got one of those permits and I'm fine. Well, yeah, okay, maybe you're the exception to the rule, but like you got to admit that the system that New York has is kind of dumb and it gets abused. And he's like, oh, some of us can do 80 miles an hour. Shut your mouth. Okay.
But I mean, when you're incentivizing this kind of stuff, when you're paying these people and they know they can make unlimited money, they don't have ELDs. Nobody's really looking at their hours because enforcement knows they're short haul, so they don't even ask for ELD and hours anymore. So these guys are running wide open. And the other thing, part with running wide open to make money by the load is you have to go faster. Faster you go, the more loads you get. And you also have to remember a lot of these municipal sites aren't accessible, but between 7 in the morning and 5 at night. So they don't just have to rush to get as many loads as they can in a 24-hour period. They only have like a 12-hour window to get as much done as possible. And that's going to determine their paycheck at the end of the week. So if I tell you, like, hey, if you work, you're going to work if it means you're going to make more money. So when you're hiring the bottom of the barrel because they can't get jobs anywhere else, and you can't hire anybody for your that's experienced that wants to do your mode of transport, you've got this environment that you've got bad people in, you know, you're going to get bad stuff out. So, I mean, if you were narrowing it down to like how to find some of the worst drivers in our industry, it's pretty easy. Look for the industries that require the worst, like you're going to be involved with the worst work, like municipal trash. No one wants to do it. Household goods. People aren't trying to do manual labor anymore. No one that's quality wants to be in household goods. Then you get to the dock bumpers and the Amazons who will work for free. These owner operators that'll do it for nothing with half their bumper hanging off and 7 different color fenders. You can almost figure out by mode where all the trash isolates itself.
Yeah, no, and another one I would add to that, sorry, NJ Peer on Twitter, but the can haulers. Holy
Yeah.
cow, man. Ooh, that's been like that forever. I remember when I was a kid, I used to run around with one of my dad's friends, this guy named Mark Williams. He had left the company he worked for in Canada. He was a character. He had like 4 wives, somehow got himself a green card to move to the US. And he went to work as an owner operator for this outfit called Container Port Group.
Yep.
And he was running Kodak back. Remember when, like, you had film to take pictures? That's how old I am. And he would pick up cans of film and other photographic products at Kodak in Rochester and go to the pier in New Jersey. And that's all he did, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I used to sit in epic lines with him to get on the pier, and then it was all chassis pool. So he'd have to like drive around at the pier and find an empty to take to Kodak to swap out and grab another one and go down. And like we would just spend all this time trying to find equipment that was not beat up, tires flat, springs broken, because like if it was, you couldn't leave, right? Like the port made you go through an inspection and the mechanics would have to fix it.
Yep.
And of course, the mechanics on the port are getting paid $40 an hour in their union and they can take as long as they like. But you, poor truck driver, are getting paid by the load. And so every minute you're waiting in line is on you. So you'd have to like spend all this time to try and find a chassis that was just not a piece of shit. And I learned very early on. I used to see some of the other trucks, like guys with flat tires, no fenders, no hood latches, like exhaust hanging on for its life, or no exhaust, or it's run underneath the truck. Everything's covered in shit. The drivers all looked like they got home from Afghanistan and just smoke and dirt and crap all over them from an IED explosion or something. And it's like, what in the hell?
But
Because like
that's power only too, right?
yeah, and I mean, one of the things I have to count my lucky stars. I complain about all this stuff, even though my own career has been awesome. I have only worked for the best of the best trucking companies in the world, and I understand that it can be that way. And I look around at all the garbage, like, why are we allowing this? Like, why isn't everybody up to our standards?
Yeah, I mean, but I think the government has gotten us to a position, not just the government, but a lot of different not of different groups like associations and bad care. They've just gotten us to a point where we're inviting in the riffraff. I'm talking about companies and modes that are inviting in riffraff, but the industry itself is started to invite riffraff over the past 15 years. And now we've gotten to a point where that's allowed us to cut wages and not keep wages up with inflation for the past 50 years. But it's gotten worse because now we have bottom of the barrel people who don't require skill to enter a skilled business market and we can pay you whatever we want.
So
Um,
on that point about pay and it not moving, you and I know this and a bunch of other people, but the ATA continues saying, well, no, the average driver actually makes this much more. And then I was talking to this guy from NPR. I had to explain something to him. So I'm waiting for this story to come out because this guy from NPR in Nebraska was looking at all the hubbub about the Kenyan thing, and he's doing his research. He's just a young kid. He's only 26, and he's only been working for NPR for a couple of years. But like he's a go-getter, and he wants to make sure he's doing the story right. So fair play to him. I can't wait till it comes out, and then I'll say his name. But he does an hour-long interview with me, and he's asking me all these questions, which proves he's been doing his homework, like detailed, like really wants to get to the bottom of it. But I had to correct him about a couple of things. So he says to me about the money thing, he's like, well, if I go on Indeed, there's all these trucking companies saying that they pay $90,000 a year. Like how, you keep saying that they're trying to drive the wages down, but if I go on Indeed, they're all paying 90 grand. And I'm like, they're not paying 90 grand. Those are advertisements. And if you look at the details, if you call those companies and say, hey, where's my contract that says I'm getting $90,000 salary a year, they're going to laugh you out. It's based on mileage. You could make 90,000. If all the stars align and the aliens show up, you will make 90 grand, right? Like that's not like, don't believe these ads. And I had to explain it to this guy. And I have to imagine if an educated guy with a credential is looking at job ads on Indeed or some of these other places where trucking companies ad, and he believes the hype, what if you're someone that just come out of prison and don't have the like mental capacity or skepticism to think, okay, why are they advertising? Why isn't everybody doing these jobs if they pay 90 grand? Why are they coming for me?
are you even looking?
Are you even looking? And so like the this is the thing. Like, how do we get people to understand that, yes, there are some six-figure truck driving jobs, but they are like less than 5% of the industry. Everything else they're telling you about what truck drivers get paid is complete and utter BS.
Well, I tell you how you figure it out. Like, if people like that really wanted to know, go to driving schools on the last day of the class of any class, and you're going to have a bunch of recruiters from TMC, Werner, U.S. Express. All the big boys are going to be there, and they're going to give their pitch. We'll pay you 28 cents an hour out the door. You're going to work for us, and we'll pay your $5,500 or $6,000 it took you to go to school, but you got to work for us for 3 years, or otherwise you got to pay it all back. And then you can kind of figure out like this is what these people are actually working for, and this is what they're willing to sign up for. So this guy who might have just gone to school for like maybe 2 weeks, in some cases, there's no state minimum duration of time to complete ELDT, right? So let's just say the average 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You're going to put him on the road with somebody who might be driving 6 months, right? Now, that's how you figure out. But I mean, there's a lot more story behind that. We could go on and on about DLDT and everything else for another hour and a half, but
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that'll get boring and super detailed in the car. So, all right. I brought you on because you're doing this awesome Substack series. So let's get into that. One of the things you did that not many people in our space do is talked about buses, right? Like trucks are not the only commercial vehicles on the road. And it appears that a lot of bus companies are having the same problems trucking companies are. Would you like to speak to that a bit from your articles?
so it's not just from the article and from what I put in there that I pulled out on the road when I was running private equity fleets for private equity companies. I mean, we were running 20 DOT operations at a time, and not all of them were property. So one of the things that I learned running passenger fleets as well is the riffraff isn't exclusive to property. It bleeds heavily into passenger, and that's why you see a lot of these passenger related crashes. And one of the things that I kept seeing all over the news, I think we a lot of times see these truck crashes and it's like, oh, what happened here? But then it's kind of like a bus crash will pop up and we hear about it and then you don't hear about it again. But you start looking at the common denominators in these things, and I'm like, that's a freaking Greyhound. That's another freaking Greyhound. That's another Greyhound. What's up with Greyhound? So you go in there and you dig into Greyhound, and this is really what the purpose of that point of that whole Substack article was. the rating system and how flawed the methodology is for the FMCSA's rating system. They are satisfactory. They are a satisfactory carrier in the United States. They have, and I don't know how, but they have two different basics that are in alert status, and their maintenance is already twice, three times the national average. So you almost have three basics that are in alert status, and I don't even remember the number right now off the top of my head, but I think it was like 87 crashes, and five of them have been fatal in the past 2 years. So MAP 21, we could talk about MAP 21 all day, but MAP 21 requires coach operators to have an initial compliance review, and then they have a compliance review every 3 years, or they're supposed to. But how is this happening to where if you're having a compliance review on the front end, a compliance review every 3 years, you still have three basics in alert status, or two, and one is three times the national average for maintenance. Yet you are rated satisfactory as of last year while you've had five fatal crashes in the past 2 years. To me, that says a lot about methodology in terms of how are we grading these carriers when we actually get them to have a safety rating. So one thing that I have found in sitting in 100+ compliance reviews for different carriers is a lot of times it's all about the sample size. We go into a carrier like Whitehawk from Florida and we pull, say they got 10 drivers, we only pull three driver files, three sets of hours of service, and then it's like, well, they look good here. That doesn't mean the other 70% of the driver pool there is good, right? But passenger carriers have the same issue, even though they have the ELDT endorsement. To get your passenger endorsement, you got to go through a whole other, get a new commercial learner's permit for passenger, then get your CDL endorsement for passenger, go to ELDT. It's still a train wreck. They're attracting the bottom of the barrel, and it's primarily because of pay on that side. They're always gone. They're having to deal with passengers all the time that half time are assholes. And then the second part of that is they're having low wage. I mean, some people at Greyhound are making less than $40,000 a year. So it's like it's just a bad environment on the coach side for that reason. But then you look at the other passenger haulers. More than 50% of the country's passenger haulers are not coach buses. A lot of them are transits, which is less than CDL, which means they don't have to have clearinghouse. They don't have to have drug testing. And they're driving 15 people to the airport in a transit without a CDL. Look at the crash statistics in that. It's the passenger market, I think, is probably even worse than the property market in terms of carriers.
Wow, and that says something because like we're talking about human life here, not just like a pallet of cardboard or auto parts or a steel coil or something which can be replaced.
Well,
That's incredible to me. On the conditions of employment for bus drivers, like if you can't tell, I'm not a huge fan of people. At least ones that don't operate like I do. I can't imagine hauling people around. I applied for a not a coach. I applied for a tour operator
I
job
could
one
do that.
time. Right. So I live in the Finger Lakes area of upstate New York. It's very pretty. We have all these lakes. There's wine regions. There's like gazillion breweries. This is a wedding destination. There's weddings here all summer. Tons of people holiday here, and there's like a whole cottage industry of people that take people on wine tours and
Right.
other and to other places around the Finger Lakes. So I called up one of these guys that operates, one of the more prominent outfits around here, and I said, "Hey, I got a CDL. Would love to come work for you part time. I can't do full time. I've got kids, but I've got a CDL. I live in the neighborhood. I know a little bit of something about wine. I know the neighborhood. Love to come work for you." And they said, "Okay, part time means 50 weekends a year." I'm like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, you have to work for us 50 weekends a year." I said, "What about 26?" And they said, "No, we're not going to hire you. It's not worth it." I said, "Okay, but you keep saying like you guys are also hiring drivers all the time." "Well, it doesn't matter. We just can't hire you." So there's this other component with the hiring thing, and I think some trucking companies do it too, right? Where they don't want part-time employment. So like, I've got kids, I do this, I've got other stuff going on, and I've contacted a few trucking companies to say, "Hey, can I help you guys, 2 weekends a month, maybe a couple of days here and there, just kind of be like casual?" And they're like, "No, no." I'm like, you say you have a shortage, you say you have all this work, you say you want help, you're advertising for people. I actually applied to be a bus driver for TCAT, Tompkins Area Transit Authority, um, to drive a bus around Ithaca. Same thing. No, we don't hire people part time. Well, fuck, man. There's all kinds of people that could work part time. All you have to do is like figure out a rostering arrangement, and that will like help you on the margins of your supposed shortage of labor. And there seems to be this real allergy to part time workers in driving. Maybe you could speak to that.
Well, part of it is a lot of these, especially with bigger companies, they look at they're monitoring their money, and one of the biggest things with money is the expense of labor. So we're not just talking about the shortage of driver labor; we're considering the wasted labor that's associated with hiring more part-time people. So one of the things that I constantly look at anytime that I'm buying a system is wasted labor. How much is it going to cost me in admin wasted labor to manage this kind of an operation or this kind of fleet tech? If this fleet tech only does half of what it says it's going to do, it's not gonna give me a better return on my investment. It's going to cost me more money and wasted labor. Even if the system costs me $20 as opposed to $50, if it costs me $150,000 more dollars a year in admin wasted labor, it's not worth it. So a lot of them are looking at it in that aspect. We're going to need more dispatchers. We're going to need more people with brains to figure this out in terms of scheduling, and it's just not worth it. That's the way we looked at it.
Wow, no, it's weird. Again, I worked for the best of the best, and the guys I grew up around back home in Ontario, they had a whole bunch of old guys. Hey, you got something for me to do? Give them a trip to New Jersey, and then you might not see them again for 3 months. Hey, oh, we're real busy on Friday night, and everybody else wants to go home. You want to come work on Friday night, and they would do it. Somebody would call in sick, hop in a truck, take a load somewhere, run a switch. Like they had no problem having a bunch of part-time guys and super casual based on a phone call right now. And now that seems like it's impossible.
But it goes back to the management of it, and I do understand it from a wasted labor standpoint. That's going to cost more money on the admin side. But one of the things with my trucking company that I do,
fire all your administrators and let your drivers administrate themselves. How about that?
that actually usually works pretty good if you get the right ones. But what I would do is I had a lot of drivers, so I tried to stay kind of diversified because I always did direct shipper stuff. I hate the broker route. Just maybe it's because I've been a broker, but I just don't like it. So I would do like partial hazmat, partial port containers, partial flatbed, partial general freight. So if one market fell out, I guarantee you produce is not coming apart. I guarantee you the port work generally isn't going to fall apart. So I can't say that right now. But one of the things that I found is a lot of people didn't want to work weekends. So it's like give them a break. So it's like your 50 weekend a year person. It's like find some of these part-time people that'll fill in the weekend spots. They might work another job Monday through Friday. They just want to drive on the weekends. So find some of those people. But that's what we did. Like we would take like some old school drivers that just wanted golf money that didn't want to drive full time anymore. They drive every weekend you wanted them to drive because that was their money that kept them the other 5 days from not having to work or sustain their teacher employment or whatever it is that they're doing now. But there's all kinds of ways you can work around it. It's just whether the fleet is actually wanting to do it.
Yeah, again, you said something very important there, administrative cost. And oh man, the bloat. One of the things I wanted to talk about in the book, and I never got any hard numbers on it, was the ratio of administrative and managerial employees at fleets to numbers of drivers they have. And do you have anything to say about that?
I don't have a ratio for that. I mean, I can look into it, but it's hard to say. I mean, you go to some fleets and you might have 10 people to 100 drivers. You go to other people, they might have one. One guy does it all. So it's so different fleet to fleet, mode to mode. Because I will say one thing about municipal trash haulers, it is difficult to manage from a dispatch perspective. You need more admin people to manage municipal trash just because you have so many dropping hooks being managed across so many different municipal drop spots and going to so many different landfills. It's real easy to mess that up. So mode matters there too.
Right, interesting. Um, back to your voluminous Substack. Can I just ask you sort of like a technical writing question or
Dude.
organizational one? So you do your series was called 30 Days of Why.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you had all of that set up before release, like you wrote it all at some other point.
Yeah, no, I've been writing it, and I did the same thing when I wrote the books. It was like over time, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And as a kid, I didn't talk. So like all I do is write. I've got newspapers right now. You can find editorials where I would write the newspaper and just gripe about why our politicians in the local area at 6 years old were retarded, right?
Awesome.
So,
Based,
but
extremely based.
my grandparents, I was born to drug addicts. So when I was raised by grandparents, after they kind of did, my parents did what they did, my grandparents were pretty political people. So they always thought I was weird because I didn't talk. But it wasn't, I was weird. That was the way I was. I didn't like people. So I'm not very much different now, but I will talk to people that I find have common sense. But it just became a thing. Like when I was a kid, I wrote so much. That's really all I did because I didn't talk. So it kind of became a thing as I got older. And you find these intriguing points about like the one I wrote yesterday on LinkedIn was actually about enterprise rent a car. It's like, why the hell am I spending 20 minutes looking at accessorial charges on a rental car? 20 years ago, I showed up, I paid $20, I rolled out, it had insurance, it had a radio, and it had roadside assistance. Now I have 35 questions that I have to answer on extra charges that come out to be more than the rental car. It's little things like that that just intrigue the hell out of you. And it's like, I'm going to dig into this and I'm going to figure out what's up with this. So that's kind of how it came about. But in the trucking industry, there's so much to talk about. And then from being a broker and a trucker and somebody who's owned a fleet and ran big fleets, and now in the compliance side, going company to company, seeing what the insurance world looks like for risk control. And it's you got so many weird things that most people don't even realize are in the undercurrent of the industry.
Yeah, I so early on as I was submitting chapters to my editor, right? Because I've been working on this book basically since February, kind of part time, full time, but mostly part time. I got kids and other stuff going on. Um, I the volume of information that I'm trying to compress into this book and everything that relates to the life of a trucker and why being a truck driver today is not what it used to be, which is sort of like the basic overarching theme of the book. My editor was like, "You could write an encyclopedia about this." I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm only scratching the surface, man. Like, I actually had an email exchange with him yesterday because we are now in final editing stages, and there's a couple little things I have to add on. I haven't done a conclusion yet. Like the last chapter's done, but then I want to do like a little wrap up. And I said, I'm gonna have to put a preface on. He says, "What do you mean you have to preface it?" I said, "There's so many truckers. It's such a huge industry, and like all the old school guys and the people that like pay attention to this, like us, are usually pretty opinionated. And I'm gonna have people coming at me saying, 'You missed this, you missed that. This is wrong. You're wrong. You're trying, you're doing X.'" And my preface to the book is going to be like, "This is not a history book about the history of trucking. This is not a list of policy prescriptions, even though they are implied. This is not telling you how to run your business. This is not saying every lease operator is getting scammed. This is not saying that every truck driver is a bad person. This is not saying any of these things because you understand that mentality from guys being out on the road. Truck drivers as a sort of group, I feel, at least in my experience, experience is sort of like um what's the word I'm looking for? Like they've got a victim complex because of all these forces that work against us, and we're always getting abused, always losing money, always having our time wasted. And I understand that, but then that victim complex like uh manifests itself in ways that like they're hostile to other drivers, right?
Yep.
Like have you felt this anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think it still goes down to in some ways mode. I think there's modes that treat people better than other modes of transport, and I think there's carriers. It kind of goes back to the carrier too, like the carrier you pick. And I think you'd probably say the same thing. There are carriers we know are trash that we would not want to work for for a number of reasons, not just money, but the way they treat their drivers. So I think it goes down to, I don't think it's a generalized thing that I run into, but it happens, especially based on what mode they're operating in and what, and even somewhat to what who they are, like what their history is. But um, yeah, that's what I think on that.
Right. And so after having written these 30 pieces, are you going to carry on with your project, or like what are you expecting to do with it? What are you getting out of it?
Well, I'll probably do the 30 days and then I'll be more sporadic about it. But one of the things that people find weird about me is like the things that I research. Like I like DNA, I like genealogy. I've found lost family members, like all kinds of weird things that people just don't care about. So there's probably a lot of things in trucking that I'll start to break down. Like one of the things I like to do is like I'll work with a lot of companies on insurance and understanding insurance because I think insurance is something that a lot of trucking companies, especially going from driver to owner operator, runs into, um, especially with exclusions and language and points where they can fall into litigious loopholes. So who knows where we'll go next? But um, I just think in reading NTSB reports and reading some of the stuff that I find in court records, it's like how did this not go further than it went? How did we it just opens up a world of questions across the whole trucking industry.
Right. I guess I'm a little bit the same, although instead of reading NTSB reports and dealing with insurance actuarial nerds, I've been reading really thick academic inquests into the industry from economists and sociologists. So like
Yep.
that's sort of one of the reasons I started this podcast was to give myself some kind of clout that like an academic would talk to me. So Sweatshops on Wheels by Michael Belzer, Data Driven by Karen Levy, The Big Rig by Steve Viscelli. I've managed to I've read all those books and I'm like, oh wow, because I'm trying to understand what's going on, right? Like this is like a multi-year project on my part just to try and figure out what the heck's going on with trucking and why things are the way they are when they're not the way they are when my dad was a kid.
Yeah.
And I've come to find out that like those people are actually really excited that anybody reads their stuff, especially if they're outside of like the cloistered world of other academics. So they've been very generous with their time. And, I've had all of them on the podcast. They've suggested other people for me to speak with. I'm working on maybe doing a presentation at Cornell here with Steve Viscelli at sometime in the future, maybe hopefully, and Karen Levy. And just trying to bridge this gap between the people who like do the real deep dive studying into what drives trucking and then the people that actually do it.
Yeah.
I think that's been it's been a fun experience. I mean, truck drivers, especially in the United States, tend to lean conservative. There's this, the cohort of people that grew up listening to AM radio and, being told repeatedly that like the academics and the university people are our enemies, but that's not true.
Yeah.
And some of them do really really good work and have explanatory power. And I think truckers would do well to read the books that have been written about them.
Yeah. I think the more people dive into it, the more they understand, the better off they're going to be. But I think that's another weakness you have on the people who are really getting into the industry now. I don't think they have a whole lot of interest in learning. I mean, they're there for the dollars, whatever carrier that means, whatever mode that means. They're looking for the easiest way in. They're not really looking to learn a whole lot.
Right. Speaking of those dollars, I have another question for you. I know your 30 days have not been completely released yet. What are we up to now? Day what?
I
20?
think we're 20 or 21.
Okay. And I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it's coming in the next 10. There's a question I've been pursuing that nobody has numbers for because it's really difficult to track. How much value is being extracted from the American economy by offshore based brokers, like all the gangsters in Serbia and Belgrade and other places in the Balkans and Eastern Europe, and then the in-source drivers, whether it be from Central America, India, Russia, Uzbekistan, whatever, Like, how much of that money that these guys are taking out of our economy are they sending home in remittances? Because it's easy to find bulk numbers on remittances, like how much money is actually leaving the economy, but getting into the fine grained detail of what industries that's coming from is difficult. And I'm wondering if in any of your research you found that out for trucking.
Not yet. I mean, I haven't found anything on it, but I have never really actually looked. But I mean, I think it probably would be worth the look. I mean, I've heard what people say, but I don't like repeating what people say because we just don't know it to be accurate or not. But I might
It's
dig.
not it's not zero.
No, it's definitely not zero. I mean, there's a reason these people are here. Now, I'll say this. We did have some Mexican truck drivers that worked for us, and they were routinely sending money home. And I asked them, like, how much money does that mean? What does that equate to in Honduras? And he would say, well, in Honduras, like, we can build a house for $5,000. Like, so, and just talking to him, there's things that you learn, like, they're making bank here, and then they're going back and, like, living the life of the king.
I mean, that's good for them.
Yeah.
I got into a minor argument with a colleague of mine back home in Canada about this because he's less concerned about all this in-source labor, and he's got the old sort of boomer, anybody can make it and they should be allowed to, which, that sounds good on paper. Um, the issue is this: if you're, again, all of this traffic in source labor is going in one direction, and then the money is turning around and going back out. And if you're a Honduras guy, it's like, great, I made $5,000 in a couple of months trucking in the United States and sent it all home and built a house. Good for you. I want to build a house here where I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes. 600 fucking grand, motherfucker. I'm not going to make that in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, we are trapped, right? Like, and I mean economically. I cannot move anywhere in the world except maybe Australia and make more money trucking than I can in the United States or Canada.
Yeah. No,
That's
I
it. Like,
agree.
there's nowhere to go. And the Australians are doing the same thing. They're converting all of their recent arrivals from India into truckers, and that's who they're using. Another great point that people like myself and Shannon have said online about, hey, if we're going to bring truckers to America from all over the world, why aren't we bringing them from places like Norway or Australia, where Australians know how to drive road trains and know how to operate really big, long, heavy equipment and have been trained properly, and they have a graduated licensing system there? Why aren't we bringing drivers from Norway that know how to deal with mountains and snow, or Sweden, or Denmark?
Because they're expensive. They're more
Right.
expensive.
Yeah, like, it's awesome. We want to, like, if this is supposed to be like number one, America, yay, we are number one. We are not bringing the number one truckers in the world, because guess what? The number one truckers in the world are mostly not Americans.
Yeah.
They're Norwegians, Australians, Kiwis, the best, to my total complete opinion, the best operators, truck operators actually running it as a piece of equipment and getting the most performance out of it, are New Zealand logging truck drivers. You want the best truckers in the world, safest, know how to operate their equipment and get everything out of it. That's who you hire. That's
Yeah.
not who we're bringing here.
No, because they're expensive. We need
Yeah.
the cheap stuff. We need the people that are breaking barriers.
Yeah. All right, Rob, I've kept you here for 90 minutes. I don't want to impugn your time any longer. You've been very generous with it. Do you have any final parting thoughts?
I think that it goes back to what I said at the beginning, like who you hire and what you buy and who and what you put on the road and who and what we give licenses to and who we give authorities to are the things that matter the most. I mean, you can consolidate ELP and all kinds of other things underneath that, but that's really the root of our issues, I think. So I think if we can get past those things, institute some more barriers, I think instead of taking them down, I think we'd be better off.
Right. Now, what do you, to your mind, what's your opinion on the likelihood of knocking some sense into the people in charge of those barriers, namely the states and the people that actually issue CDLs?
Does it matter? Is the first question. And I say that because right now you've got Duffy, and I think Duffy is open to hearing what we have to say. I think he's got the aptitude to understand what we're saying and to see what's happening in the industry. But what's to say that in 3 years we don't get another administration that's not of that same aptitude and that same open ear and open-minded mentality? So I think it boils down really to the leadership issue on the admin side of who's running our industry. The ATA is always going to be there, but the leadership of the industry is going to change. So I think that's what we really have to overcome on the policy side, because we've become so left and so far right and so far left, and we're so divided that as soon as one administration comes out, everything gets changed back, right? Or you go to a whole other side of the spectrum. So I think that's what you have to look at, is like not necessarily what decisions are we making today for trucking, but how is that going to change based on the administration change in 3 years?
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of like short-term political thinking. When's the next election? When's the next midterm? How am I going to get donors? And again, I believe the ATA spent $2.8 million on lobbying in 2024, which is, chump change compared to some other industries, but still a substantial sum of money to lie to politicians about what's actually going on in trucking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, Rob, how do people find you online?
You can find me at Truck Safe. I'm now on X. I've been on there since 2012. I just didn't actually use it. But LinkedIn, the usual suspects.
Right. And so you've got this, you bought a domain name in order to get around Twitter's stupid jihad against Substack. So your handle for your Substack is
The T, but it's raw. It's
talking
talkingreckless.com with a W.
talkingreckless.com, which redirects to the Substack, the T,
That's it.
where you are spilling the tea about all of the problems with the trucking industry and doing a fantastic job of it. Everyone go read it. Follow Rob. His 30 Days of Why series is fantastic. This is the kind of journalism and investigative work that the media used to do, but now that they're just all posting clickbait and extreme partisan garbage, you have to rely on guys like Rob and our friend Danielle and others. So Rob, way of the road.